Hello, Black Phillip here. This is my second YouTube video, and I thought today we would talk about the new Tolkien movie coming up because I'm a huge Tolkien fan. And of course, if you like what you see here, hit that like, and if you want to hear my thoughts in the future, hit that subscribe button. So let's just jump right into it. I got the Tolkien film Wikipedia page pulled up here, and I'll admit it, I've liked Tolkien since I was a little kid, beginning when my father read me The Hobbit when I think I was about 7 or 8, and it stuck with me since. I read The Lord of the Rings by myself. I loved the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy. The Hobbit trilogy I didn't really like so much. It left a lot to be desired, and I think that this new Tolkien movie is going to go more or less the Hobbit route. I don't know what Peter Jackson did to make the original Lord of the Rings trilogy just such a classic, but I think it had to do with, number one, making it palatable for a wide audience, and then number two, he more or less kept with the books. I know that a lot of book purists out there, would disagree, and they got all mad that the movies weren't exactly like how the books were. But I think that Peter Jackson more or less kept the integrity of the story in terms of plot, also in terms of the themes and motifs that are reoccurring throughout the entire Lord of the Rings series. However, with this Tolkien movie, I have my doubts. I've watched the first 2 trailers that came out, and while I'm still excited to watch this, and I'm wanting to be surprised by this movie. It's just I don't think that this movie is necessarily going to capture the essential essence of what made Tolkien's literary works so special, and that really has to do with his spirituality and to a further extent his Catholicism. I think that this movie is more or less going to follow his relationship with his wife Edith, and also with his friendship with some schoolmates and some people that he served with in World War I. Now, this period in Tolkien's life was incredibly formative. A lot of the imagery that we see in The Lord of the Rings having to do with evil, comes directly from the trenches in France, where he served on the English side, obviously. So, after watching the trailer, it looks like a good movie, but it might look like an entertaining movie, but for somebody who's like a Tolkien buff, I don't know if this is necessarily going to hold up. One thing is that I think this movie is going to get a PG-13 rating. I really like history, especially history surrounding World War I and World War II, and from what I understand of World War I is that it was just a complete nightmare to be a part of, and I've always wanted to see a really good movie on the level of a Saving Private Ryan, that takes place in the trenches in World War I. So that would come with an R rating and would really capture just how terrible it would have been to be in a trench in World War I. And I don't think that this movie is going to have that. And I know that that time and place was incredibly formative on a young Tolkien. So I'm expecting that to be it to be more or less tame combat footage, if you will. Also, one thing is, how Tolkien and Edith are basically supermodels. I really like movies that, don't necessarily cast the best looking people. It just gives, whatever film I'm watching a little bit more of an edge, and it feels more, it feels more real. That just confirms what I think, in regards to them making this a packaged movie that's aimed that is aimed at as many people as possible. and I mean, it's being distributed by Walt Disney, so like, of course, they're going to do that. You know, I really don't like what Disney is doing, you know, or what Disney's putting out. Especially, like, you know, I could go into another video about Frozen and how that isn't really a good story, but let's just assume that, you know, you already agree with me. I think that, you know, Disney is going to muck it up. I really don't trust Disney at all to preserve the integrity of stories. And what else can be said about this movie? Right, so Tolkien's spirituality was incredibly formative on him, and while The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and The Silmarillion weren't direct allegories for Christianity or, you know, the Christian story, they're still heavily influenced, you know, by Christianity, by that religion. And I'm expecting this movie to more or less completely erase. There's someone really loud outside. But anyway, I'm expecting Walt Disney to basically, or Disney Studios to, Jesus Christ, it's so loud outside. All right, anyway, sorry. Completely throwing off my concentration. Right, back to the matter at hand. So Walt Disney Studios, I think, is going to pretty much steer away from, you know, Tolkien's Catholic background as much as possible. It looks like, in terms of plot, this is going to be more of like a romance story between Tolkien and Edith. And, you know, they no doubt had a very strong relationship. However, I think that they're going to replace the spiritual aspects of Tolkien's work and somehow push the idea that, you know, his romantic relationship with his wife and also his fraternal relationships with his schoolmates and his fellow soldiers, you know, is what makes The Lord of the Rings great. And that's just not the case. It's just not. You know, that could be argued, but, you know, if you really dig down into the history and the literary analysis, Tolkien was, you know, very much influenced by his Catholic faith. And I mean, it remains to be seen. I'd like to, you know, I really want to see this movie when it comes out. I just don't know how, you know, how Disney and let's see, you know, Fox Searchlight are going to, you know, pull this one off. I think it's going to not really do that well because it's going to upset a lot of, you know, the book purists who tend to be, you know, people who acknowledge, you know, Tolkien's history and his actual background. And I think, I don't know, I mean, because it really is just portraying his roots, you know, like I forget how, you know, how financially well the Hobbit movies did. I'm sure they did fine because, you know, all the promotion and, you know, the marketing behind those movies, and also just the name recognition of, you know, Peter Jackson and the Lord of the Rings. But the Hobbit trilogy cannot stand next to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And it's just my opinion that, you know, the Tolkien film, you know, is destined to go that route as well. Well, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. And I'm going to watch the movie when it comes out, and, you know, I'll probably make a follow-up video. Again, if you like what you saw here, hit that like. If you didn't, I don't know, go do something else. I don't know. And if you want to keep following me, hit that subscribe button. All right.